Hello again, welcome to Palm Springs here. This is Greg Balson's version of KPSP, and he recently revised it. It's really good looking, and that of course is the Carenado Pilatus PC12, now in its second iteration, and now in the 1.2 version of its second iteration. And I love the hell out of this plane. It's got available a built-in GTN 750, though it doesn't have two built-in, or a 750-650 stack. That would be fun too, but it's kind of hard to complain when you can get your COM and nav1 functions here on a 750 and a flight plan and all the rest of it. Easy to enter with clicks of the mouse instead of twiddles of the knob, and you've got a full-size 530 down underneath it as an auxiliary, and also some Avidyne goodness which I have yet to explore here. Reason why we're making this flight right now is to point out some quirks with the flight director and autopilot, and somebody on one of the forums brought this up, and Joe at Carenado/Thranda mentioned that he would have a look at some of the modes and the enunciations and things, and see if everything was kosher. I had the same concerns myself, and what I did was I had a read of the appropriate documentation for the gizmos and the gadgets, and I just want to start walking you through some of the gotchas as they stand right now, and some of the ways in which the programming of this thing and that thing and that thing don't quite match up to the real world. I ought to start with a caution in saying that programming autopilot logic, I'm sure, is not easy. And that's for a bunch of reasons. One is because the systems in here might not always correspond one-to-one with an autopilot function that X-Plane has built in, and if they don't, then you have to do your corresponding own programming instead of just mapping up these buttons with built-in functions, and that's not easy. The other thing is, if you don't fly planes necessarily with every different kind of autopilot function available, sometimes it's just plain hard. There are subtleties to it, there are traps, there are gotchas, and there are ways in which the behavior doesn't necessarily work the way you think. What I've found mostly, I'll say, as a passenger in planes with all kinds of these gadgets and gizmos, and only secondarily and very, very sporadically so far as a pilot of them, is that for the most part, autopilots will not will not by default try to kill you. Mostly autopilots and flight directors, when you just bang a button that turns them on in almost any way possible, unless you've deliberately misset something, they will basically revert to a keep doing what you're doing, hold the wings where they are, or hold them level, or hold the heading you happen to be on and hold the pitch attitude you happen to be in. So there won't be a case where you hit autopilot on and all of a sudden the plane dives for the ground, or turns in some odd direction. Generally speaking, the initial default mode of most autopilots is wings level, or a roll hold, which is just don't do anything in the roll dimension except hold what the pilot already has, and pitch hold. It's generally the way they work. Anyway, what complicates things is you have things here. Well, let me just walk you through what these things are. This here is this here is this thing here. That there is that there, and that there is that there, and that there is that there, more or less, pretty close. This is, the entire system is the KFC 325 flight control system by Bendix King. And this is the KMC 321 mode control, or if it were a Boeing, it would be a mode control panel, or if it were an Airbus, it would be a something or other flight path control system or something like that. This is the KAS297C controller and annunciator here. We do not have installed a separate Autopilot annunciator panel. It partially enunciates in the lights here and partially enunciates here in little messages up here. These would be in a Boeing, would be the flight mode annunciator. So that is more or less how it works. It is a 3-axis autopilot. As you can see, it has yaw damp functions, and it controls all 3 axes. It has control wheel steering, which basically allows you to mash that button, disconnect the servos, diddle around with where you want the nose to be pointed, and then let go again, and the autopilot will re-engage, and it will capture whatever it is you've set with the yoke. But this is the business end of it, and this is where some of the confusion has come in, because I've noticed that a bunch of lights here stay lit up when they shouldn't, or at least I've suspected they do, and a bunch of things operate not quite as they do in the real world, which I suspected. And one of the problems is that you can't really get the flight director in all the modes you want it to be in. Really, the way this is set up, according to the manual, is you can hit any of these buttons: heading, nav, approach, IAS, and well, altitude hold is not applicable, and there's a logic flaw in this too, which we'll point out in a second. And it will basically put the green flight director bird in the appropriate position with cues for you to do whatever it is you want to do. So for instance, if I wanted to preset, and we can do the same thing when we're flying, and we'll see if the logic is different when we're flying, because it could be. But I'm just going to adjust my heading bug here to say, about 15 degrees or 10 degrees off of our flight path to the left. Don't know what I did there. By the way, that's actually adjusted, in case you're wondering, on this control panel right here, which is sometimes overlooked. I saw somebody on the forums asking about it. Course and heading, and if you want to sync it up, it doesn't have, it's not like a Garmin G1000. You can't just push it and sync your headings. So anyway, you can adjust it using those knobs, or I've bound it to keys so I don't have to go heads down to do it. I wonder if you can pop up this panel. I wonder if you can. No, but I think if you go like this, no, okay, that pops up the mode control panel. But it'd be nice if this one popped up too. Let me just look around, see if there's a little, doesn't seem to be a hot spot for it, but that would be nice to be able to pop up, considering you use it a lot. You could have this and that over here, just because unlike in the real plane, you don't, well, even with track IR, it's a bit of a to-do to kind of look down like this. It's not quite precise, and you're sort of juddering around like that. But anyway, I digress. So The way this is supposed to work here is, just pop it into our, okay, flight director operations. The KFC 325 can engage in only one horizontal, one vertical tracking mode at a time. That makes sense. Number of methods are available. It is not necessary to press the flight director push button prior to selecting a flight director mode. Depressing any one of the heading, nav, approach, back course, altitude, or IAS push buttons will activate the flight director in the respective mode. Depressing the flight director mode controller push button will activate the flight director in a pitch attitude synchronized to the current pitch and wing level hold mode. In other words, as I mentioned before, if you merely mash this, whatever it is you're doing, it will basically put you in a don't make any drastic changes mode. It will capture your pitch and capture wings level. And so if you just simply blindly hit this and blindly fly that, as long as you're not already in an unusual attitude to begin with, you're not going to be in an unsafe attitude by following it. That's, of course, irrespective of terrain and other obstacles and things, but that's that goes without saying. Now, here's what happens in this plane when you hit the heading mode. Nothing happens. And here's what happens when you engage the nav mode. It says nav armed because we don't have a course or anything set in, but if we did have something tuned in, it wouldn't always say armed. The arm white simply means that until you get close enough deflection to actually have to turn onto the course, it simply provides straight ahead guidance. It says armed, and it's basically in a heading mode, but we'll disengage that. This is not really an appropriate mode, but again, it says armed, and that's fine. IAS mode, which should then it should put up the bird right up here, and then through airspeed would come alive. Let's see if it does that. Does not. And if we want to pre-arm a pitch mode, I think it will, but let's just see. No, it does not. Now, if you hit flight director here, it actually does put in heading guidance, but that's misleading because your heading mode isn't explicitly set. And well, you know what, let's plug in for sake of completeness here, let's put in a quick flight plan just to see if it gives us nav pre-guidance. So we'll go from where we are, we'll go to KTRM, which is thermal. TRM, and there we go, and that should be active. Sure it is. Yes, back. We're in VLOC mode, so let me just get us into the right mode. All right, so now you notice the HSI indication changes. You notice that we're barely, we're almost on that course. Now let's see what happens if we flip the flight director into nav mode. Plausible. Let me just set a course that's way off there, but it seems like plausible. Let me let's divert somewhere that's a little bit away from there. So let's just change our destination to what am I doing? Remove that. And we'll go instead to Las Vegas, which I think is back in the other direction, but I'm a little bit discombobulated right now. If not, we'll put in the Paradise VOR or something like that. All right, Las Vegas. Yeah, okay, there we go. So let me just double secret activate that, although it already is. Now you notice we've got a magenta line, and the magenta line is pointing us that way. And the HSI is correctly displaying that way, and we are deflected from the course, and that is correct. And I don't know if this goes up for non-precision guidance in the real thing, but okay, we've got that there, and that's reasonably plausible. However, our nav mode is really not correct. It should be at least calling for a turn to about here for an intercept, and it's not. So that much doesn't work either. So that needs some work. You ought to be able to preset a heading and preset a course or whatever, and have it just work. Anyway, moving on to the lovely and talented altitude pre-selector, because this has got a little bit of a screwy function in it too. And in this model, it's more confusing than it really is. In the real thing, what this thing does, and let me just scroll to the appropriate page here. Well, first of all, let me just do this and freeze my track IR so everybody isn't getting sick. We'll come back to the flight director in a moment, but here is our gizmo here, our KMC something or other, and its operation is actually very nice and very convenient. Basically, what it is supposed to do is give us a convenient way of setting, pre-selecting altitude, rates of climb, and then engaging them. And the way it is supposed to work is that it arms the flight director for capture and tracking altitudes selected with the altitude vertical speed pre-selector. It must be engaged to provide flight guidance to the point of altitude capture. Upon reaching capture point, the selected vertical mode will cancel. Flight director will transition to altitude capture, then altitude hold. Altitude select is activated by setting the pre-selector to the desired altitude and then depressing the arm push button. Okay. During altitude arm, the selected altitude may then be changed without deactivating the arm mode. In other words, you don't have to disarm the old altitude, set a new altitude, and rearm the altitude. You can just adjust it. But so let's just do that. So let's set an altitude of, pardon my geeky mouse here, that's entirely my fault. Let's set 4,000 feet. Now, we've set it, and this is the logic of the thing. Set arm, or set engage, or pre-select arm, pre-select engage. And that isn't quite the way it works now. It does correctly work here, so watch. We'll hit arm. However, this is not supposed to light up, because this is supposed to be, according to the POH, this is supposed to light up when the altitude is captured, and when this button is actually pushed, this is supposed to be an altitude hold button. So whatever else you're doing, if you smash this button, that green light will light up. The flight director will then instruct you how to steer to capture the altitude that it just captured. So hitting arm should not turn that light on or off, and it shouldn't hit this button, because this button is supposed to be the stop right where you are and give me cues to stay at it button. It shouldn't be the arm button. Let me just see on here whether there is some other enunciation. Let's just see. Okay, now, and here is, of course, the altitude hold button. And, all right. Now, oddly enough, when you click it on and click it back off, it captures the altitude we're at, which is what it's supposed to do. It's just not, I don't think, supposed to go on when you pre-select an altitude. So like 4,500 feet and on, that shouldn't light up. It should light up when the altitude is captured. So we'll just unhitch that. You see, you push that twice. So that looks like a glitch, but let's just make sure. Okay, altitude hold can be entered directly by depressing the Alt button on the mode controller or in conjunction with the altitude select mode. Engaging hold directly will cause the aircraft to fly through the desired altitude, then recover from the other side, obviously, because the second you hit it, you can't, you know, immediately jam the nose down and capture it. You'll scare yourself, scare the passengers, scare small animals, and maybe hurt the airplane. Okay, so selecting altitude hold after the altitude select mode has been engaged cancels the select, which makes sense, and causes the arm annunciator to extinguish, which it did. Here, let's rearm it. Let's rearm a higher altitude, one that actually will engage arm. So the arm is lit up. Now this should not light up, but again, assuming we're climbing, but we're not at 5,000 feet yet, and we want to stop, what really we should do, this shouldn't be lit up, is we should hit this once. It should capture our altitude and extinguish that, but instead we have to hit it twice, and now it extinguishes it and captures the altitude. So that doesn't seem to be right. But in any case, let's now look at the other function. The vertical speed function. And the way you engage in the real thing is you'd pull this knob, and the vertical speed is entered by rotating the extended pre-select knob, pull it. Vertical speed is activated by depressing the engage function. So again, select, engage, select, engage. Vertical speed is activated by depressing the ENG push button while the desired vertical speed is displayed on the altitude vertical speed preselector. Verify that the preselected vertical speed displays the caret in the appropriate direction. If no vertical speed value is displayed, this is another autopilot not trying to kill you. If no vertical speed is displayed, depressing engage will cause the flight director to command a climb or descent at the rate current upon selection. So as we take off, if we hold a pitch attitude and we're in a certain rate of climb, if I hit this, it should just cause the flight director to stay where it is, more or less, because it will command the same rate that we have captured. But at any rate, the vertical speed commands may be modified through use of the autopilot vertical trim right here, or by control wheel steering, which is again to disengage the servos, point the nose where you want it, then re-engage them. So let's see what actually happens here. So say I want to climb to 5,000 feet, if I can just, yeah, there we go, 5,000 feet. I'll arm that. This will erroneously light up. Now, say I want to pre-select the vertical speed at which I want to climb at, or at which I want to climb in this ever-changing world in which we live in. Yeah, I know, Paul McCartney screwed it up and I screwed it up. I'm in good company here. I'm not left-handed, I don't play the bass, I'm not cute, but I can mangle English with the best of them. So, there's our vertical speed, so let's set it. Well, let's push that first. Let's set it again. So there we go. So now, let's twiddle that up and say we want to climb at 1,400 feet per minute. Now what that ought to do immediately is set or preset a flight director mode, I think. But let's just set flight director right now. No, it doesn't. All right. So that doesn't seem to work, and let's see if it works with respect to the nav. No, pre-arming nav doesn't work either. So, all right, we've got a cluster of not quites. But anyway, as you'll see in a minute, though, when we depart, well, let's just engage this. All right, now that seems to do the right thing, which is that it goes back to 0 feet per minute because that's the state we're in. So that's good, that works. But all right, let's just pre-select here. And I think I see the subtle problem, and I'm not sure whether this is a programming problem or a problem with the autopilot. The way this should work is that right now there should be an arrow right here. But once you start climbing, it seems to me if you hit engage on this, it will capture whatever mode, whatever rate you're going at, actually. Let's see if there's a little bit of a misunderstanding either on my part or Carenado's part, or just something confusing on Bendix King's part. Okay, no vertical speed is displayed. Pressing engage will cause it to command a climb or descent. No, it looks like depressing this while this is displayed should pre-select it, but it doesn't. Let's see if the same thing holds in flight, because what we should be able to do is set a vertical speed that we want for our climb and engage it and have the autopilot and flight director guidance change. What I've noticed, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but if I use the trim button here with the flight director engaged, I can now set a flight director mode for climb out. Now, this may simply be doing what the POH says it should do, which is that absent anything else, this trim will simply control pitch, not vertical speed and not IAS. Let's just see what happens if we change to IAS, though. And we use our trim. All right, it does not do anything. In the real thing, what this trim button would do in IAS mode would be it would manipulate a bug here, up or down, that would then indirectly make our nose come up or down, whether it's slower or faster. But I'm not sure if you can pre-select it. Some of these things don't work until you're on the roll or until your wheel's up, so we'll have to wait to test that. We do know, just for a fact, that this arm function is wrong, and we also know for a fact that that you want to be able to pre-select a mode here and have it show here. So that doesn't seem to be right. Yaw damper shouldn't be on the ground, but let's just see if there are any weird quirks from having it on. Shouldn't break anything. and it doesn't. Let's also just test all the lights, and that works. So let's do this. Let's try to climb out of here on a heading. Okay, we can't. Let's engage this and try and climb out on a heading. All right, that's weird. This seems to be employing a dual function here, either in its programming or in X-Plane's Autopilot, which is, well, here, let's make our heading change a bit more extreme here and see if the flight director changes. No, it doesn't. It's just sort of random. Hit half. Oh, well, that's interesting. All right. It may only deflect a certain amount when you're on the ground for reasons unknown to me, but what does show up is that when you hit half bank, it reduces the deflection here. But here's the thing. When you hit heading here, it seems to do one of two things. It either goes to a kind of pre-select little half-cocked sort of turn, which may correspond to a standard rate turn. I don't know. And let's just see if as we change the heading, the needle changes. Okay, it does. However, then when you hit heading mode again, that disconnects it. Okay, so it goes to wings level. All right, that's probably the right behavior. But until this flight director is turned on, it doesn't display, and according to the POH, hitting any of these things, regardless of whether you hit the flight director, should turn it on. So that's a little bit subtly off, but you can work around that. Let's just get flying and let's just see what the different modes do. So we're going to go start out with our basic autopilot is not going to kill you mode, which is we are going to depart here and we'll simply, first let's simply engage the flight director, and what it should do is it should capture the mode we're in and simply give us cues to stay on it. So let's be all pedantic here and get our lights on. Have to read the manual to determine whether an inertial separator should be on departure. My instinct says yes, only because of possible debris, I guess. We're certainly not in icing conditions, but that being the case, and just to keep us from possibly doing the wrong thing here, let's just disengage our vertical speed arm here. Arm it, disarm it, just toggle it on and off. All right, so let's just get rolling, climb on out of here, and see how this thing works and see the ways in which maybe it doesn't. I've got a clear mode control panel. The real airplane displays a warning if you take off in low idle mode. I don't think this does. It doesn't, but that could be an NG function. And the NG's got its own glass panel, and it displays a big fat no takeoff warning. I'll quote our current president, no takeoff, you're the takeoff. All right. Enough politics for the flight. Let's just get airborne here. Little hesitant on my rotation as usual. All right, so we're climbing out. I'll go gear up here. My rudder trim's a little out of whack here. Let me fix that. All right, so now when we engage our flight director right now, it should just hold us wings level and do nothing more, nothing less. And right there, immediately, it's wrong. It seems to be grabbing this 0 feet per minute here and saying we should be in a vertical speed 0 mode. However, it's not engaged. Nothing is armed, nothing is engaged. So that seems to be wrong. As a matter of fact, watch what happens if we were to be silly enough right now to engage the autopilot. Watch what would happen. And that's not the behavior that it is supposed to take on. It's not supposed to look at this and do that. It's absent any other guidance, any other input. It shouldn't give you guidance for 0 feet per minute unless this is engaged, but it's not engaged. So now let's try another trick. Let's do this. Well, wait, before I do it, let's keep the noise down here. Let's say we're going to do this. So what we'll do is we will pull back to our normal climb out, pitched for about that speed. And we will again engage the flight director. It should just capture this, but let's just pretend that this is the way it really works, and we'll hit engage, and it should capture the current rate of climb. Let's see if it does that. All right, so flight director comes in, and you see it's got erroneous guidance based on this. So now we'll hit engage here. All right, now that is correct behavior. That's capturing the particular vertical speed. But now say I want to change that vertical speed. So let's climb at 400 feet per minute. Okay, that seems to work too. Now, let's just change that. I don't have a control wheel steering button here, so I'm just disengaging that, and now let's re-engage it here. Okay, that works too. Now let's disengage it here, and let's again cycle the flight director, turn it back on. Now you see it's capturing what's here regardless of whether it's armed or not, which I don't think is the correct behavior. It doesn't seem to be. All right, so now let's arm an altitude. I'll get my flaps up here. Well, first of all, let's do this. Let's go into, let's turn off the flight director again. Let's go into heading select mode. And it doesn't do anything. So now let's go to the flight director, and that's weird. You see, nothing lights up, nothing changes here. But if you turn on the flight director, it goes into no heading mode. That's fine. If you just hit heading, it doesn't do anything. And then you hit the flight director, it does. So it in a hidden way pre-arms heading, but the right behavior should be that if you merely hit the heading mode, it will capture the pitch mode you're in other words, command no changes to that, and then give you guidance for your pre-selected heading. So the logic there is weird. However, this heading button seems to toggle it in a hidden way before you turn on the flight director. So here, we'll try two ways. One is we'll engage the flight director, and that's already armed. However, If you turn off the flight director again, and we hit this again, even though there's no enunciation one way or the other on this, so you heard the click, but there's no other indication, then you hit flight director, and its wings level. So it's as if you're doing this, toggling it on, toggling it off, only there's no light, there's no indication. And there's also, in flight director mode, there's no enunciation here. That's an unsafe heading, so let's just turn on the autopilot now. And again, it captures this instead of, well, no, okay. It does capture that. But now we'll get into heading mode here. That does work. It does light up. Heading lights up. Autopilot yaw damper lights up. But this enunciator should enunciate regardless of whether the autopilot is engaged. It should tell you I'm in heading mode, and the only thing that shouldn't light up is the autopilot. So let's go into our nav mode now, and that lights up nav, and that seems to be correct. And let us now trim down our rate of climb. Oh my goodness, I accidentally hit nav. That's my own fault. Now heading shouldn't also be lit up. Once you hit nav, the heading should go away. Unless it's arming to capture. So let's see if that's the reason why. But let's just now use the altitude function as it's meant to be. And that does capture the altitude. Bring our power back a little bit. Beautiful Palm Springs down there. All right, now, altitude nav are enunciating, that's correct. Heading and nav are also enunciating, that is almost certainly incorrect. So let's just see as we intercept our course if that heading enunciation goes away. It should. And while we're doing that, we can, I'm sorry, I'm reaching over to my desk, my real desk. What we can do is take a look at the reference here, and let me just see if doing anything at all with the heading bug now changes any enunciations. It shouldn't. All right, it doesn't, and that's fine. So a nav mode, let's see if we can find it here. All right, nav and nav arm. When the nav mode is engaged, flight director commands roll attitudes necessary to track the course, blah, 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 blah. KFC 325 adjusts the gain or aggressiveness of the autopilot based on the selected sensor to provide optimum performance. Upon selection, the nav mode either engages nav arm or nav capture, depending on the proximity. While any horizontal tracking mode may be engaged in conjunction with the nav arm to provide intercept guidance, initiation of the nav capture sequence cancels the coexisting mode, cancels it. So engaging nav should cancel heading. You can set a heading to be to intercept, and then hit nav and it will stay on that heading and intercept. However, instead of heading a nav, nav arm should enunciate, and I will bet you, although I'm not sure, nav arm should enunciate here. So here we go. Now, if the deviation is sufficiently small, rate of closure is sufficiently high, flight director initiates the capture sequence immediately. So obviously we're not, because we're not close to our course at the moment, but we'll get there. Just want to make sure I'm at a safe altitude, because, well, bad things can happen. So that the sequence should be hit nav, either have it fly the heading you're on if you're in heading mode, or immediately initiate the intercept if not, extinguish the heading light, light up the nav arm light, and then when capturing the nav course, should extinguish the nav arm light, and this should be capture. So here we go, we're starting to capture. The guidance is right. I still don't know whether this should enunciate in a non-precision approach mode, but I have to do some further reading on that. So here comes our capture, and you can see it's going nice and smoothly. The autopilot is coupled very, very nicely. And let's just see what our enunciations do there and here. Okay, we are almost captured. Here we go. All right, that doesn't work. The heading should extinguish itself. Now I'm going to hit the heading button, and you can see our heading is deviated. I want to say, all right, I'm just going to extinguish this goddamn light because it shouldn't be there. So I'm going to try to pop out of heading mode, but I'll bet you what it's going to do is erroneously put us into heading mode and turn us to the left. Let's see what happens. Yes, okay. So that's a gotcha. It's lit up when it's on, and it's lit up when it's off. Let's go back to nav mode. Again, turns us back to our course a little bit drastically, and again, heading doesn't extinguish, which tells me that this is programmed sort of as a, well, it's got a lingering pre-arm logic to it that it shouldn't have. This should simply not be lit up in that mode. Now, let's try another couple things here with the autopilot, and the same thing would hold for the flight director. Let's see if it enunciates correctly. So let's initiate a descent to an altitude at a certain rate. So let's just see, these are the descriptions and here are the procedures. Okay. So again, we can pre-arm an altitude and we can select and then engage a vertical speed. So let's do that. So we're flying around and we want to go down to 6,000 feet. So unpause it here, and we'll make it easy on ourselves here. We'll first set an altitude. Okay, that captures our current altitude, and that's fine. And let's go down to 6,000 feet. Okay, come on. All right, now we'll arm that. Now there's no mode selected. Now again, this is still lit up as if we're capturing the altitude, but all right. So that is lit up as armed. And now let's set a vertical speed. We want to go down at nice, gentle 900 feet per minute. So now, as we hit engage, we should go down. Let's see if we do. No. All right, let's try this. We don't go down at all. Let's go down again. 600 feet per minute. I obviously had that set as a climb, so maybe that's why we didn't go down. That could be my own fault right there. Hang on, let's halt this. Now again, altitude hold works when you hit it, but it's lit up when you hit it and it's lit up when you don't hit it, so that doesn't seem right. But anyway, let's start over again because obviously I screwed it up. So let us set an altitude. Again, we'll make it 6,000 feet. And let's arm a vertical speed. Well, first let's arm the altitude. It's armed, and again, this is on almost no matter what. It's on if you use it to hold altitude, and it's on if you arm it. You know, I'm struggling to see if that's somehow a correct behavior, because if you, hang on, see where we are, okay. Because you don't want the airplane to do anything until you explicitly command it to do it, and if you haven't set a rate yet, maybe it still should be in altitude hold mode. It shouldn't be when you pre-select it, obviously on the ground. But that's a philosophical question, and I don't know the answer to it. But anyway, let's pre-select the rate at 600 feet down. Now let's hit engage, and let's see if it does it. No. Hitting engage captures the mode you're in. So now it seems like the way you have to operate this is you have to hit engage and then spin in a descent. Now it will do it, but that is not really the way the manual says to do it. The way the manual says to do it is that in the vertical speed mode, vertical speed is activated by depressing the ENG push button while the while the desired vertical speed is displayed. Okay. So that makes sense. So what you do is you pre-select the desired vertical speed while it is displayed, minus 700, you hit engage and then it'll do it. If no vertical speed value is displayed, depressing ENG will cause the flight director to command a climb or descent at the rate current, which is the correct behavior. So here, let's just do this now. Let's again level off here. And yeah, so that's verifiably bad behavior. Okay, the altitude is captured and it says that. So again, we've got 700 feet per minute displayed. Let's hit engage and see what happens. No. It just captures our momentary rate of climb and descent, which is practically nothing. So that seems to be broken. Let's see if the same holds true for a climb. So altitude mode, we want to climb to 9,500, and we hit arm. It says altitude armed. It says wings level mode because we haven't chosen a pitch mode. And let's choose vertical speed mode right now. So let's pre-select a vertical speed, as the manual says. Not 3 feet per minute, but let's say 700 feet per minute. And that does it, but that's because it's engaged. Let's disengage it and let's try it again. Sorry about that. So while that was engaged, it did the right thing. But after altitude capture, this shouldn't be engaged. It should disengage. Capture the altitude again. I'll have to rearm our altitude right here. Rearm the altitude. Make it 9,500 feet or 600 feet, doesn't really matter. Arm it. Again, the ambiguous altitude capture now. Again, we are not engaged in vertical speed. We'll say we want 800 feet per minute. We're not climbing, that's correct. Now we hit engage as the manual says, and no, see, nothing happens. So you have to hit engage and then initiate your climb. Now, let's just say we want to switch into IAS mode. Right now, I've just increased my power, and this should make the nose come down. Okay, it does. So IAS mode works correctly, and let's see if IAS mode works correctly with the down and up trimmer. So let's trim up a little bit. It does work. There should be a corresponding speed bug here, but there isn't. There should be some way of showing what your reference speed is, but there isn't. Now, let's see if we level off. Okay, there's our alert. And we should also, this should be off right now, and when we hit 9,500, it should capture. So altitude arm is set there. Okay, that's correct. The altitude arm extinguishes, but we're still climbing. All right, we leveled off a little bit high. Let's see if we settle down here. We do not. Now I'm going to hit altitude hold, which shouldn't do anything at this point, but okay, now that does correctly extinguish the altitude hold, and now let's try altitude hold again. And let's just see whether it captured that altitude, which was 9602 or 04. All right, it did. And it seems to be holding it. All right, so there are a bunch of inconsistencies here. Let's do this. Let's do control wheel steering, as it were. So let's disconnect our well, here, I'm going to hit disconnect servo, or just disconnect the autopilot. It should keep the flight director guidance. Let's see if it does. Okay, it does. Now, I'll put us in a shallow descent. And we'll capture IAS mode. And we'll engage our autopilot, and it does not. However, no, it just does not. Okay, there's no altitude here armed anymore. the arm is not lit up. So again, let's take out the autopilot. We'll start a climb, and what it should do is it should just hold the pitch mode we happen to be in. Let me just extinguish that just so as not to confuse things. Disconnect the autopilot, pitch up. Now what should happen as soon as I engage the autopilot is it should capture my new altitude. I get the feeling instead it will go down to where our flight director is, which is not. You know what? It could be because I'm not engaging my, well, here, we'll go to autopilot, and again, yeah, it comes down here. This could be because I haven't explicitly invoked control wheel steering mode. I'm sort of faking it. But you would get around that by doing this. So we'll initiate our climb again. We will recycle the flight director. Now, putting in the flight director right now should capture our current rate. So let's see if it does. No, it still doesn't. It captures some hidden altitude mode. So watch, I'm going to put this in, and I'm going to toggle altitude mode off and on. And now, you see, now it goes to its correct behavior. But again, there's nothing enunciated here. So any of this behavior is hidden from the operator. So watch. Let's get rid of the flight director again, and let's initiate a climb and a roll here. And just watch what happens. Now, what should happen when you put in the flight director is, okay, the pitch guidance is fine, and it should still be on nav, and it is. Now let's disconnect nav, and there it should correspond to what we are at, and it does. So using nav, it works. I'll go back to nav, and it'll command a rate of turn to get us back onto our course, and everything is Jake. But again, in the vertical mode, it doesn't work. So again, if we here go recycle the flight director, now we'll turn it on, and it should correspond to where we are, and it probably will because we haven't toggled this back and forth in a hidden way. Here, let me just get out of nav mode here, so as not to confuse things. Okay, so off with the flight director, on with the flight director, and it's more or less correct. Now, off with the flight director, on with nav, and on with the flight director, and it is correct. What's incorrect is that the flight director doesn't come on immediately when you hit nav. When it comes on nav, it should bing, do that, and this. But what does not work is if you capture an altitude like that, and again, I'm just going to get rid of nav here for our own convenience here, and do wings level. Here, let me just get into that mode and get out of it again. Okay, so there, wings level at this current altitude. Let's turn on the autopilot so we capture it perfectly. So we capture this altitude here, and again, disconnecting the autopilot and disconnecting the flight director should allow us then to capture a new rate, like right here. So it should end up right here, but it's going to go back down here because it still thinks it's in altitude hold mode. So that commands a dive, and we don't want to dive. So let's get out of altitude hold mode, and now it works. But disconnecting the autopilot and the flight director should cancel any mode you're in, but it doesn't. So if you're in this climb mode right now, getting rid of the autopilot, that does the right thing. You just keep climbing. Getting rid of the flight director should let you recapture to a new pitch attitude, let's say here. Let's see if it does, because this is extinguished now. Okay, now it does. So there's just some subtleties here that are a little bit off, but probably nothing that can't be fixed. The real there are problems with this interaction and with that, and with the flight enunciations here and up here seem to be a little bit off, and a bunch of other little annoyances to do with just looking. I shouldn't be navigating by the map here. To do with capturing GPS approaches, which I'll take a look at, make sure I'm not screwing up myself, and get to in a different video. I seem to have lost my track IR. That's nice. All right, so let's do what we should do with an autopilot here. Let's hit altitude arm, autopilot in, see if it captures that, flight director on, and it does. And in the meantime, I'm going to plug my damn track IR back in. Pardon me for a minute. It should capture altitude. Does it? Does it? Does it? Yeah, it does. Okay. I just have to say, overall, I really love this plane. It's a kind of go anywhere, do anything contraption that is a lot of fun to fly, and it feels good. It really it operates nicely. I'll say that much. And the Carenado people, or the Thranda people, have been getting better and better and better with each iteration with their Just Flight stuff. And with this, the previous version of this wasn't especially great, and they're iterating it very, very quickly, all things considered. So, you know, that much is really encouraging. Let's just get direct back to Palm Springs. Let's do, is there a GPS approach with LPV? No. And load and activate. And let's see what that looks like. We'll just vector ourselves here. So now, probably correctly, we can just do this. Go into heading mode. We'll set a heading. Let's see what our intercept is. Still, my track IR doesn't work. There we go. That should work. But it doesn't. Oh, that's nice. All right, well, no matter. Everything's a little screwy here. All right, so we'll set a heading here. Yeah, all my settings are screwed up, so why is my intercept showing that way? I don't want to go that way. I want to go direct. No, I don't want to suspend. I want to vector myself here, and not sure why the HSI is showing what it's showing, because we should want to go that way, but hell, let's just do this. Flight plan. Oh, I see. All right, here. Well, let's do this. Let's activate the wonderful hold. Let's see if we can do an ad hoc hold. Okay, we'll hold. I want to hold at Palm Springs. All right, doesn't let us do an ad hoc hold. In other words, hold present position. Does it let us choose present position? No. But let's see if we can create one. So here we are, right there. Graphically edit flight plan. No, that's not it. No, I'm groping around for this. So let's just redo our flight plan here. Menu, delete, add waypoint, okay, PSP, load a procedure, approach, transition thermal, because we're getting close to thermal, load approach, activate, there we go. Now we'll hit nav mode, and whoa, hello. All right, that should really command an appropriate intercept, but so much for that. All right, let's see how this thing sequences. Let's also look at our chart here. Now again, what I want to do is I want to pre-arm an altitude. I'm gonna arm 6,000 feet, and let us pre-arm or arm a rate of descent. Now it doesn't go down. Let's see if we can trick it by taking it out of altitude hold mode. No, it still doesn't. Let's see if we can do engage. No, it captures. Okay, that's wrong. So the way we'll fix that is we'll use this. See, now what'll happen is if you hit engage, it'll capture this, which is fine, but it's really not what we wanted to do. Now let's see if continuously adjusting it using this can adjust it. Okay, that works. And that's as described. That's the way it should work. Now let's go into IAS mode and we'll roll off the power and see if that changes things. So off comes the power, and now we should descend faster. All right, that part works. So that's good. All right, there is Thermal Airport. KTRM looks like. Not sure why my view settings have all been farkled, but all right. And in the meantime, what we'll do is we'll check our approach plate here. Okay, we're going for the RNAV 31 left with the thermal transition. All right, so we have to stay above above 4. We should be good. We have to be below 5,500 at thermal. We're going to miss that by just a touch because we're going down almost as quickly as we can. So that much is screwy. Now, did I accidentally toggle off my X camera? Nice. All right, well, I've screwed something up, obviously. There we go. All right, nothing that flipping the switch 6 or 7 times won't fix. All right, so down we come. We have to be below 5,500. So let us set a new altitude, set 4. Now first let's just set a rate and engage. No, it still doesn't do it. This is not the fault of the plane, this is my mouse. There's 4, arm it, and vertical speed mode, come on. There we go, that much works. Again, shouldn't say heading and nav, and it shouldn't say wings level right here. That's another problem. Just see what our approach is going to look like. Oh, you know what? That wasn't thermal. Keep the speed up. Now, if I delete this hold, will it continue to sequence the approach? That is not a Carenado question, that is a Garmin question. Let's first of all see if it captures altitude here. Or as they say in Philadelphia, altitude. Okay, seems to capture. Roll in a little power. Only, you know what? We are below a safe altitude here. All right. Come on. Come on. All right. Because we're approaching unsafe condition here, let us do this ourselves. There we go. Climb in IAS mode. There we are. That should be enough. Let's see if we can thank you, Betty. Set an altitude. Come on. There we go. Arm it. $1,000 away. I'm going to recapture IAS mode here. There we go. Do a little trimming. Engage the autopilot, and does it engage in the correct mode? It does. Okay. It holds the mode that you were in, as it should. But again, this is all confusing. We've got altitude as if it were altitude hold. We've got altitude arm, which is correct. We've got wings level, which is not correct. We've got nav, which is correct. So a little bit of confusion here. And we should be making our way to thermal. Alright, it's got a turn anticipation there. That seems to be correct because there's no hold. We are capturing altitude. Alright, and that is correct. Altitude there is correct, and that is captured. And nav is correct. That is the mode. Wings level has gone away, although it never should have been there in the first place. And we'll make our way in. There should only be advisory vertical guidance here. Let's see, is there? Yeah, we're fine. We are clear of conflict, but not by a hell of a lot. Okay, so there is the Salton Sea, and there is Thermal Airport. Let's see, are there procedures for thermal? Let's fly that instead. Let's have a little fun. Little rocking on the old Salton Sea. Okay, so there's a course reversal. Good, this should be fun. We've got 22 till our hold. Why the hell not? Little vacation spot here. All right. Okay, 30. Okay, we should be at Jared at or above 3,500, and we certainly are. But we can start to come down, and there we go. There we go. Arm that. And again, we're now going to, we should be able to set a vertical speed, but we can't. But we can do it if we do it backwards, if we do engage first. So watch this, watch this. Do this backwards. We're at 0 feet per minute. Now, if we dial in a speed right now, and hit engage, it's not going to do it. See, doesn't do it. However, if we engage at our 0 feet per minute and now dial it down, now it works. So the logic of this is working backwards. And the reason why the logic is there in the first place is so that you don't inadvertently put yourself into a climb or a descent until you absolutely want to. In other words, until you confirm by looking at this and then engage by hitting this. So the logic of this is backwards. All right, so there is beautiful, beautiful thermal on the beautiful Salton Sea, only it's not beautiful anymore. There's the field. All right, there's runway 30. And Jared is right around there. The Salton Sea was once touted as sort of like the Riviera of the of Southern California area. It was sort of a vacation hotspot, but then the lake started getting saltier and saltier, and the source of water for it dried up, and it turned into a festering kind of salt, muddy, nasty, half-baked salt flat, and all these, you know, all thoughts of it becoming sort of like the Lake Tahoe of the area just kind of died. And if you go there now, it's people living in trailers and people who want to sort of lose touch with society, kind of loner types. It's kind of fascinating. Okay, so we'll have a course reversal here, and I'm not going to activate the approach function here yet. We are level, that is good. And I'm going to let ourselves slow down a bit. Go into that hold in a minute. There we are. In a second, we should be showing the approach chart. I love the 750, and I love Carenado for having incorporated it. So this is the Salton Sea, and as you can see, it's just, well, it's just desert. And it's mostly deserted. But there are a lot, I've seen a lot of like inland seagulls here. The problem is that the lake is so now salty that almost nothing can live in it. And there's so little oxygen, almost nothing can live in it. So it's turning into kind of the Dead Sea. Just as we enter this hold here, you should see, well, let me slow down to a decent holding speed. As you can see, it's just a gorgeous piece of work. I mean, there's no two ways about it. It is just magnificent. The reflections are just beautiful. The banding in my sky because of my video card is probably not, and we're just entering the hold here. A parallel hold entry, and we're at a decent holding speed. That's good. And in a second, we'll fly this reversal and then re-intercept. And the question I've always got is, when I put it in approach mode, I shouldn't have to set an altitude below the altitude we are at, but we might in this case. I don't really want to set our MDA, but let's see. Our MDA, because we're almost below sea level, is 374. Set that plus 50 because it'll allow us to level off and execute a missed approach. Set 400 there. I don't know how to set a decision altitude on this. It seems as though you can only set a decision height, which is too bad. There we go. Put out a notch of flaps here, help us along. Spool in a little bit more power. And I believe, okay, we're still not in the approach phase, but I believe we're going to have to I think we're going to have to handle the vertical component ourselves, although it should be LNAV plus V, so let's see. Anyway, our decision height is what, 300? It's perfectly clear out, but stay legal there. All right, here we come, intercepting our approach. Probably as soon as we cross the next fix, it'll enunciate our service level, which is what, LNAV VNAV or LNAV plus V. It just says RNAV GPS. LNAV looks like right, here we go. Wait till we get established here. Be a little faster. All right, there's the field. We're doing this purely to see how well the Autopilot / Flight Director works. I will bet you that since this is not an LPV approach, there may not be explicit vertical guidance, and if there isn't, we can't expect the Autopilot to fly it. Instead, we have to fly these step downs here. So we're coming in on Jared, and it is telling us for our level of service, nothing yet. See, we're inbound to Jared, and we need to cross Jared at 3,500 or above, and we will. All right, waiting. I'm guessing when we hit Jared, we will get an annunciation right here. Okay, yes, LNAV plus V, so it should have vertical guidance. But I'll bet you it's not going to do it. So we should probably fly this step down, which means we should probably now fly a vertical speed. And if we fly a vertical speed here, we have to do it backwards, which is, come on, which is by arming it, engaging it first, and setting a vertical speed, which again is not really the right way to do it. So we're not relying on this approach mode for our vertical guidance. We are right now just in a VS mode. 3-degree slope. We did that a little bit late, so we're going to need a little bit more than 3. So let's slow down. And let's go down at about 1,000 feet per minute should do the trick. All right, so we're working off of lateral guidance mainly. For only, I don't know the answer to that. But it's not displaying vertical guidance, nor, I don't think, would you expect it to, strictly speaking. A G1000 will take this, an LNAV plus V, and will give you a sort of fake, a synthesized glide slope from it. It is not supposed to be used for precision purposes. It is supposed to be advisory only. All right, we can start to shallow out our rate here. Boy, that's hard to do without having a better mouse or a better set of hands than I do. That's just a power lever position question. All right, well, this seems to be tracking everything very nicely. We can go gear down, and in any case, it's a Garmin Reality XP question, not a Carenado question. So now, as you know, I've been struggling with the yips in the flare. So let's see how we get on this time. Do flaps 30, it's all we need. Now, another thing to check is as we disconnect the autopilot, it should keep the flight director on, and it should keep all the trim and other settings as they should be. So let's just get our feet on the udder pedal. Disconnect the autopilot. Good. It leaves us in a trim state. Get rid of the yaw damper. Kill our caution. And let's see if we still remember how to land. We've got nil winds. That's good, as they say in Britain. A little heavy on the controls here, and we're a little low. But that's okay. I want to slow down a bit anyway. And let's break off at the last minute and do a circling approach to runway 35, so flight director can come off. Want to have our fun here. A little bit high, but that's okay. Landing. There we go. Land a little bit long. And see if we can cure ourselves of the yips. Got him right there. Flared early and yipped. Okay, we're in beta here, which is normally the way you taxi this plane. Also bring the condition lever to ground idle. And that's modeled nicely. Beta's modeled nicely on this plane. Actually, the flare is modeled nicely if one only flies the plane right. And it's just a really nice bird to fly. So kudos to Dan and Joe. Just need to fine-tune the autopilot logic a little bit. And we'll just snuggle up to a G5 right there, if I'm not mistaken. Unless it's a big-ass global. I can't tell. But we're in no way embarrassed by the company. That is pretty cool. I think this mode enunciation should probably go away also if you take out the flight director and the autopilot, but again, the subtleties that I'm not aware of, or the difficulties. Just snuggle up next to this now, they'd been working on, well, X-Plane's been working on their PT6 model, and somebody complained that the spool down time was not quite accurate on this plane, and Joe pointed out something really interesting, and that is that the generators present a load, so if you have the gens on, they're going to slow down things a lot quicker than they ordinarily would. So let's turn off the avionics for starters. and turn off the gens. Totally ignored our lights here. And you know, I don't think the bus tie is functional in this. It's interesting because the NG model has got two sets of big ass generators and a setup like this, and the original version doesn't to quite this extent. I'm wondering whether they modeled the NG electrical system or the original, the classic electrical system, but in any case, we'll turn both of our gens off, and you'll see that it takes about a little more than, I think it's about 5 seconds to spool down, which is about right if you look at videos. Well, whatever the actual amount of time is, it corresponds pretty nicely to the videos. So we will, of real planes, of real Pilati. So let's just do it. It's a pretty nice animation. It's very nice animation. Gets a little bit at the end, it just sort of, that's pretty damn good. That's really, you know what, that's right there is the only time there. It just doesn't quite coast to a halt, but I mean, that's really, 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 really nitpicking. So let's just get ourselves shut down here and get some stuff in. There we go. Let's take a look at this fine looking piece of aviation goodness here. Look at that. That is oh so nice. Can we get any closer? No. Nice looking plane, nice flying plane, and I hope this video helps iron out some of the idiosyncrasies in the Autopilot and Flight Director as it stands. And in the meantime, I hope it helps all of you get a better handle on the quirks, at least for the moment, so that you don't get bitten by them. Take a tour of another one of Greg Balson's beautiful airports here. Bid you farewell. Hope everybody enjoys Super Bowl Sunday, and go no one in particular. I'm a Steeler fan. What can I say? Anyway, see you all later. Bye-bye.